A flamingo is putting on makeup. Right now in a lagoon in southern Spain, it rubs its cheek on a gland near its tail, then paints the color onto its own neck. Not a metaphor, that's the researcher's word. The pink you picture isn't something a flamingo is. It's something a flamingo does, over and over, because the sun takes it off. For decades we called it a seasonal moult. There is no moult. So if the color has to be put back on by hand, what happens the day a flamingo stops? Stay, and you'll get the half nobody tells you. And the one thing that makes a flamingo give it up completely. Start with the half you already have, because you have it right. A flamingo chick hatches whitish, goes pale ash gray within a day, and grows a second darker gray down at about 10 days. And that gray is the whole bird. A biochemist named Dennis Fox worked out what's in that down back in 1962. Melanin. Only melanin, the same drab pigment that's in your own hair. So a flamingo chick isn't a pale flamingo, it's an unpainted one. The color arrives through the mouth. Flamingos can't manufacture carotenoids. They eat them out of algae and the creatures that graze on algae. Fox came back to it in 1967 with V. Elliott Smith and Arthur Wolfson and found the same dominant pigment in all 6 flamingo species, canthaxanthin. The supporting mix shifts from one to the next, different chemistry, different pinks. And it's slow. A greater flamingo doesn't reach its finished adult coloring for 3 or 4 years. Gray at hatching, pink from food, years to get there. That's the story, it's correct, and you already knew it. Now here's the half nobody tells you. Hold on to one detail, because everything turns on it. A feather is dead. Once it's finished growing, nothing more reaches it. It's a fingernail, with a color baked in on the day it was made. And here's what quietly puzzled ornithologists. A shed flamingo feather goes pale fast. A flamingo molts about once a year. So how is a living flamingo vivid pink in March, on feathers grown last July? Feathers that would fade in a fortnight if you pulled one out. Something had to be keeping it up. In 2011, out at the Fuente de Piedra Lagoon in Malaga, a team led by Juan Amat found it in the one place nobody had checked. The preen gland. Every bird has one. It sits at the base of the tail, and it makes the oil birds use to condition their feathers. Carotenoids in preen oil had been suspected for years. Nobody had confirmed it. Amat's team did, and found something better. The pigments in the oil were the same specific pigments sitting in the feathers, chiefly canthaxanthin, a matching tin of paint at the base of the bird's own tail. And they watched them use it. The bird throws its head right back, rubs its cheek against the gland until the side of its face is loaded with pigmented oil, then rubs that cheek along its own neck and breast and back. The more it applies, the more colorful it gets. And that isn't an impression, it's a measurement. It does it far more through the courtship season, October to April. And the birds carrying the most color nested earliest. They aren't pink, they're wearing pink. Which clears up something the textbooks had been getting away with for the better part of a century. Here's what the books said. Once a year, ahead of breeding, a greater flamingo grew itself a second set of feathers, a pre-alternate molt. New feathers, new color, in time for the season. Ornithologists had been recording it since the 1930s, and it's a perfectly sensible thing to write down. A bird changes color, so the bird must be growing new color. There is no such molt. Greater flamingos don't have one. The current species account in Birds of the World, written as it happens by Amat and his colleagues, says those reports appear to rest on 2 things at once. Young birds running unusually protracted molts, and carotenoids applied on top. Not one or the other, both, tangled together for 90 years. And keep the honest version of this. Nobody is claiming a century of ornithology looked at cosmetics and saw feathers. Birds changed color, feathers were the obvious mechanism, and feathers got written down. They weren't growing the color. Some of them were putting it on, which leaves an obvious question. Why would a bird need to keep reapplying anything? In 2021, a team led by Maria Cecilia Kiel got hold of a grim but valuable sample. 30 adult greater flamingos, found dead in the Camargue after a cold snap in February 2012. First, the pigment. How much sat inside a feather tracked how much sat on its surface, and that tracked how much was in the bird's own preen secretion. One chain, end to end. Food, gland, cheek, neck. Then the test. Take 2 matched feathers from the same bird. Put one out in direct sunlight, put the other in the dark. Leave them there, with nobody to maintain either one. The ones in the sun lost their red. The ones in the dark held it. And the feathers carrying the most pigment on the surface lost the least. So the color isn't stable, it's perishable. And a flamingo lives in an open salt lagoon. Flat water, no shade, sun on it all day. There is no worse place on Earth to try to keep it. So the pink is something a flamingo does. Which raises a question nobody asks. What happens when it stops? Because there is one thing that stops it. Not a bad season, not a shortage, not old age. A chick. Flamingos are one of very few birds that feed their young on something they manufacture inside themselves. Both parents do it. This isn't a mother's job. Under the same hormone that drives milk in mammals, the lining of the crop thickens with fat and protein, the cells come away, and the chick is fed on them. For months. So zoo nutritionists went to find out what's actually in it. Not in a zoo, out in the wild, on the Yucatan coast of Mexico. Ann Ward's team, 14 chicks, 6 and 7 weeks old. Dry weight, about 35% protein, about 57% fat. An extraordinary thing to hand a chick. Then they went looking for the carotenoids. Canthaxanthin, the pigment in the preen oil, the one on the neck, came in at just under 30 milligrams per kilo. The working figure for keeping a captive adult in color is around 25. The chick is being handed more color than its parent needs to stay colored. Now, here's the part almost everyone gets slightly off. The popular version is that the chick takes the color out of the parent. It doesn't. Nothing is recovered from those feathers. Ward's team were careful here. Their reading is that the pigment is more likely being routed into the crop milk instead of continuing to be laid down in the plumage, rather than pigment already in the feathers being called back. It's what happens to a hen on a carotenoid-rich diet. Most of it goes to the yolk, and the rest of her loses color. Not because anything was taken back, because it stopped arriving. That's part 1. Part 2, from Amat's team again in 2018. During chick provisioning, the carotenoid concentration in a flamingo's preen secretions falls to the lowest point of its year. The bird is still applying. There's just less color in what it's applying. Part 3 is the Camargue result, still running quietly in the background. The sun is still working on whatever is already on the neck. So, redirected, not replaced. Left out in the light. Nothing is taken back. The supply turns toward the chick, the upkeep drops off, and the weather does the rest. And this is where the fading gets interesting. That 2018 paper set out to explain something that isn't supposed to happen. In greater flamingos, the females are the more colorful sex, and in a monogamous bird with no reversal of roles or size, theory says that should be rare. The cosmetics are the answer. Female preen secretions carry more carotenoid than male ones. And the females carry the heavier costs, the egg, the fasting on the nest, the larger share of the feeding. They fade hardest. And when they fade, the pigment doesn't disappear. As the concentration in the preen gland fell, the concentration inside the bird went the other way. Off display duty. Put to work internally, as an antioxidant. Which is what makes it worth reading. This isn't decoration, and it certainly isn't vanity. It's a resume. It says, I can find enough of this to have some spare. And it's honest because it's spendable. A signal you couldn't give up would prove nothing. This one proves something because it goes first. So here's the small thing to carry out of all this. Picture the bird you've always pictured. Shallow water, that neck, that color. You've read the color as a fact about the animal, the way brown is a fact about a sparrow. It isn't. It's a coat of paint out of a bucket the bird fills by eating, put on by hand and taken off by the sun about as fast as it goes on. Now picture the other bird, the one at the edge of the colony that's gone nearly white. Your eye reads it instantly. Sick, or old, or finished. It's the opposite of all three. The palest bird in the colony isn't the sick one. It's somebody's parent. It's the one that filled the bucket, handed the whole thing over, then stood in the glare for months with something small and gray at its feet, and never got round to putting it back on. And that small gray thing will take 3 or 4 years to earn a color of its own. Then it will spend the rest of its life putting it on every morning, out of its own tail, and, if it's lucky, giving all of it away.